14. And this whole book has been about the king. And this is the coronation of the king. There's a day mentioned repeatedly in the Bible that we should be anticipating with eagerness. It's called the day of the Lord. It's the major theme of this chapter. In fact, it's referred to in verse 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 20, and 21. So you can tell that is the theme of this chapter. And as you know, the day of the Lord is not a 24-hour day, but it's a period of time when the Lord will bring judgment against the wicked and salvation to those who are faithful to Him. The New Testament makes it clear that the hallmark of this day will be the second coming of Jesus Christ to this earth. He will destroy the nations that are on the verge of destroying Israel. And He will establish His millennial reign over all the earth from Jerusalem. But before He comes, Jesus prophesied that there will be a great time of tribulation such as never occurred before, nor will there ever be after. At the end of the tribulation, there will be these cataclysmic events in the heavens. All the nations will mourn, and they will see the Son of God, the Son of Man, coming in the clouds with great power and great majesty. And He will send forth His angels and His elect from all over the earth. That's seen in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21 through 31. Tell us of that glorious event that will take place. Then Jesus will rule all the nations of this earth from Jerusalem with what's called a rod of iron. We see that in Revelation chapter 12 and Revelation chapter 19, verses 15 through 20. Zechariah 14 refers to this great coming of the day of the Lord. And although some people seek to explain this chapter in terms of the past, they think this was historical invasions of Israel and ongoing battles with the church. But I don't think that the context in which Zechariah has been speaking warrants that. This chapter is best explained and kept in context in reference to the Jews and the events that are yet to come, those that are still in the future. It refers to that great final battle that we all call the Battle of Armageddon. In Revelation chapter 16 and in 19:11. It's even referred to in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. When Israel is surrounded by the armies and the nations of this world, they're on the verge of annihilation. The Lord will return in glory and power. In verses 1 through 3, we're going to see Jerusalem ravaged. And in verses 4 through 8, we're going to see Jerusalem rebuilt. In verses 9 through 15, we're going to see Jerusalem rescued. And then in verses 16 through 21, we're going to see Jerusalem restored. Let's take these individuals. Let's take the first three verses and look at Jerusalem ravaged. Notice what God says here through His prophet. He says, "Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. And I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravaged, and half of the city will go into captivity. And the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against all those nations, as when He fought in the day of battle." Zechariah saw Jerusalem in the throes of what we might say is the final agonies before the coming of the Lord, when He's going to end all the sieges ever happened. I want to remind you, anti-Semitism, the hatred of the Jews, is endemic in society. In fact, there are times that it could get so bad you might say it's epidemic. And when it does, it leads to what we call a Holocaust. Anti-Semitism will be curbed during the first 3.5 years because it will suit the Antichrist. It will benefit him. But just as soon as it no longer benefits him to stop the persecution of Jews, he will then become to persecute them worse than it's ever been before. In fact, in Matthew chapter 24, it talks about a time of Jacob's troubles. This is going to be worse. If you were to put everything that Israel has had to face, everything that Jews had to face, this is multiplied maybe 1,000 times over. This is going to be, they will have never at any point in history wanted to be raptured or be taken, be rescued so bad. So when he says, "Therefore, when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, the prophet, stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop, let him come down, and to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back for his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that the flight will not be in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor shall it be ever again. Verse 22, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. In other words, God has made promises that he's going to keep to those that will fit into that group. Let me remind you that Jerusalem has been sieged many times. The first time that Jerusalem was overthrown was by King David. When David overthrew the city and rescued it from the Jebusites 700 years before the founding of Rome, according to 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 6 through 9. Jerusalem was plundered by Egyptian Pharaoh Shishak in the days of Rehoboam. That's in 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 25 and 26. Then you may remember Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, threatened to overthrow Jerusalem, but Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon came up and burned the temple and then reduced the city to just pure rubble. The people of Jerusalem have suffered all kinds of atrocities under Antiochus Epiphanes. The Roman general Pompey attacked on the Sabbath day. He killed over 12,000 people in 63 BC. Let me just give you a few more, just to show you that this is not something that was in the past. These are something that all these things that's happened, it's going to get worse. Jerusalem faced takeovers in 37 BC, AD 70, and AD 135. Those are just the hem of the garment. Israel has always been a target for those who hate God. And we're going to see at the end of time, those who hate God are going to come against Jerusalem, because God's going to say, I'm taking my hands off for a little while. He's going to let all those nations come up, and then he's going to get in the fight. And when God's in the fight, you don't need anybody else. You know? So the attempt to take over or destroy Jerusalem continues even to today. And of course, you've been there. You've seen all the devastation that takes place. Back in 2004, when I was there, it just had got through with all the Scud rockets and all that. I mean, they've always been in a time of turmoil, and it's going to get worse. The Hebrew people have never been as desperate as they will be when Zechariah 14:2 that we just read is fulfilled. When God says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravaged. He goes on, he talks about how horrible it's going to be on that day. But I want to remind you, in a day when it all seems lost, look at verse 3. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. What exactly does this mean? It means that God himself will destroy the nations that march against Israel. Somebody said something about Putin marching on Israel. Bad move. I mean, don't do it. Of course, he's going to be so drawn to do it. He has no choice but do it. The hatred that he has. But anyway, then the Lord will devastate the Antichrist, and he'll disarm the devil. You realize the only power the devil has is what God allows him to have. There's coming a day, and I know the fact that when the Bible says that he's a roaring lion, well, he doesn't bite you unless you let him. He roars, he sounds terrible. But there's coming a day when all the arm that he has, any leeway he has, God's going to disarm him of everything. And he'll no longer be a threat to Jerusalem or anyone else. And then verses 4 through 8, let's look at Jerusalem rebuilt. Look at the beginning of verse 4. And his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cling to the midst thereof, toward the east, but also toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall be moved toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azel. Ye shall flee there, like ye have fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah the king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come with all his saints with him. And it shall come to pass that in that day that the light shall not be clear, nor dark, but it shall be one day as it shall be known of the Lord, not day nor night. But it shall come to pass that at the evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in that day that the living waters will go forth from Jerusalem, half them toward the former sea and half toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter it shall be. By the time Christ returns, the world at large will be in shambles. Devastating wars will have been fought. Earthquakes and all kinds of natural disasters will have wreaked havoc on this earth. And notice what it says, is the moment people just don't understand the awesome power that's in the person of Jesus Christ. But look at what it says, is his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives. What's going to happen? The Mount of Olives is going to rip open. When just the feet of God himself comes back and puts his feet, the mountain's going to split open. That's what it says. And of course, he's doing it to make a way for escape. That way the Jews can escape through that. And that's what he tells them. I'm going to provide you're going to be so sieged. I mean, you're going to be wondering, God, are you going to kill all of us? And God's going to come back and personally put his feet on the ground. And it's going to split up and provide a way for those that are still trapped to be saved. Or to be brought out safely. This speaks of the Lord, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, materially turning back to this material world and actually setting his feet on the Mount of Olives. Thus it says that at that time the great split cut the Mount of Olives in two, and the persecuted people will be able to flee through the valley that's been made. He says, thus the Lord my God will come in with all his saints with you. Jesus will touch his feet on the Mount of Olives, and when he does, the people will see his glory and his majesty. And all the saints, in other words, all the armies of heaven will be with him, as described in Revelation chapter 19 and verse 14. This is the type of arrival that the Jews were looking for earlier. They missed it. He came as a lamb before. He's not coming back as a lamb. When he comes back, he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He is the King of kings and Lord of lords. And we read about that last week. So this is what they look for. They're going to get it finally. It just took them at least 2,000 years too late, if not longer, depends on when. But indeed, when the Roman armies surrounded Jerusalem in AD 70, mistaken assurance from prophecies like this made the Jews think that this was taking place already, but it wasn't. This is not what it was talking about. That day is still yet to come. At the evening time, notice it says, it shall happen that it shall be light. Now, Zechariah looked forward into the glory of Jerusalem and in the Messiah's kingdom. Here's what he's saying in all that. You and I have light that we got our lives by. We don't have a pure light. We have a Bible that is pure light, and we guide ourselves by that, but we're influenced by all kinds of light. And sometimes it looks grayer, sometimes it's black and white. I'm a very black and white person. It's either here or here. Well, not everything. Some things in them, I'm very black and white. But here, what he's saying here is, he says, there's coming a day when the light that you're accustomed to seeing, it won't look normal anymore. And the reason being, think about this for a moment. When Jesus Christ comes back to this earth, what is he? Not only is he truth, he's light. And when he comes back, all the light that you've been using to guide yourself with, you won't need it anymore. You have the light of God. And so the light of God will guide you. He says, at the evening shall happen that it shall be light. And this is what Zechariah sees. He's seeing the light we have just diminish. Because it's not pure light. But he also sees the raising up of that which comes from the person of Jesus Christ. He says, not only that, but living water shall flow from Jerusalem. Jerusalem will no longer be a dry city, but a glorious river will flow from the city. It'll go to the east and to the west, and it will never, ever have an ending flow. That's what it says here, both in the summer and in the winter. In other words, even not in the rainy season, this is going to occur. And I'll tell you why it's going to be that way, because God's going to make it that way. All over the world, people will want to know about Jerusalem. Zechariah says, I know the answer now. God will gloriously save and restore Jerusalem, making it his capital city for the millennial kingdom. Ezekiel 47 records a vision very, very much like this scene. He sees a river flowing from the throne of God down to the Dead Sea and bringing life. If you ever been to the Dead Sea, you know what they call the Dead Sea? Ain't no life in it. It's amazing. It's hard actually to swim in the Dead Sea. It is such a different water. It is so salty. And I've been swimming in the Dead Sea. I got to go to the Dead, the Med, the Red all on the same day. It was just a long trip to do that. But I got to go swimming in all three of those on our way out of of Israel. But when you get to the Dead Sea and you try to go down, you better keep your eyes closed. Or you'll be like, oh, help me, Jesus, like I'm blind, you know. But you try to swim, you pop up. I don't know how you could drown in the Dead Sea unless you just, you know, because you don't have to even try to bottom, you just pop right back up. And but anyway, in Ezekiel's version here, when he sees this flood, he goes all the way down to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea's not dead anymore. Why? Well, just water can't change that. All you put is water on top of dead water, but when you put living water on top of that which is dead, then what's happened here? That's what he said. He says, "I see a day when the Dead Sea's not dead anymore." When's that going to happen? It's going to happen the day of the Lord, when He comes back and He puts His feet on the mountain, splits open in all His majesty, all His glory. When the water begins to flow, it flow all the way down to the Dead Sea, and everything that was dead will no longer be dead. Well, verses 9 through 15. Let's look at Jerusalem rescued. Beginning verse 9. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. And in that day shall there be one Lord, and His name one. No doubt about it. Not Buddha, not Muhammad, not anybody else. His name is Jesus. And all the land shall be turned as the plain of Geba to Ramon south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and be inhabited in her place. From Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, to the Tower of Haniel, unto the king's wine presses. And men shall dwell in it, and there shall no longer be any utterance of destruction. But Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. You know, it's been over 2,000 years since Jerusalem has been safe to live in. Still not safe to live there for the people who live there or anyone else. But there's coming a day when the Lord comes back, it's going to be different. Verse 12. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord shall smite the people that have fought against Jerusalem. He's going to let them come up and fight, and then he's going to take them out for coming up. It's their choice. They don't have to fight against Jerusalem, but their hatred for God and their hatred for Jews will cause them to do it. And God says, and I'll smite them. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And they shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them. And they shall lay hold every one to his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against his neighbor. These are all the people fighting against God. Now they're fighting against each other. And God has caused it to happen. Verse 14. And Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem. No, she's going to fight with Israel. So Judah and Israel will be fighting together. And the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and apparel in great abundance. And it shall be a plague of the horse and the mule and the camel and the donkey and all the beasts that are in the tents, as this is the plague. Now, all the land shall be turned into the plain of Geba to Remnon, south of Jerusalem, since the mountains around Jerusalem are no longer there. You know why the mountains are there? The mountains around Jerusalem is a natural protection. They don't need protecting anymore, because the Lord Himself is going to be seated on the throne of David there. And so while He's there for the millennial reign, there won't need so the mountains will be moved. And so it'll be flush all the way, be just a flat plain all the way. No need for the mountains anymore. Jerusalem will be safely inhabited. Like I said, that hadn't happened in a long time. In fact, like I said, David is the first one who took it from the Jebusites. So if you really want to go back, we know this from there up until now. It's never really been a safe place. But that day it will be a safe place. Jerusalem will be safely inhabited. And at evening time it shall happen that it will be light. Now Zechariah looked toward the glory of Jerusalem in the Messiah's kingdom. The lights will guide us by His will, and His will not diminish. Ours will. He says the living flows from Jerusalem. No longer need to be a dry city. It's a glorious river that flows off to the east and to the west and will never, ever stop. Even in the winter and the summer, it will continue. All over the world, people will want to know about Israel. And like I said earlier, Zechariah says, I've got the answer. This is when it will happen. He says that this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. All their flesh will dissolve as they stand on their feet. In this glorious deliverance of the Messiah, brings the enemies of God against him. They'll be destroyed by a plague. We're not told exactly what that plague will look like, except we do know that it will cause all these things to happen because of that plague. It means mutual slaughter, mutual desertion. The scripture of flesh dissolving, some people think Zechariah is describing the nuclear bomb. There's no evidence to that. You know, if God just wants your flesh to dissolve, it will. God can choose nuclear bomb or anything else he wants to use. Nobody really knows how it's going to happen, but we know this, it will happen. All those who fight against, you know, I'll be honest with you, I think if I hated Israel that bad, I think I'd read through this first before I went to attack and realize if I hate them that bad, I better be ready for this because that's what's coming. Because there's nothing sure than the word of God. God says, that's what's going to happen. Fight against my people. And I'm going to let you do it for a while. But when the city's half taken away, he says, that's when I'm going to come back and split it open. And the thing is, all these things could happen that quick. It could be 1,000 years before they start, or it could be they're already started. We don't know. But notice here it says, the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be gathered together. In his glorious deliverance, the Messiah brings Jerusalem, all the wealth back in. You realize Jerusalem has been robbed and robbed and robbed and robbed and robbed and robbed throughout history. Now God says, in great abundance, I'm going to bring it back. Gold and silver, all the material possessions, God says, I'm bringing it back. In other words, God's restoring them. It'll be an influential city again. Which brings us to verses 16 through 21. Jerusalem restored. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and shall keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whosoever will not come up from the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even then, shall make it not rain on them. And if the family of Egypt not go up and comes not, they will have no rain. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that will not come up to feast at the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all the nations which do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day shall they shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord. This is an emblem that's going to be on their breastplate of all the horses. And the pots in the Lord's house shall be like bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem, meaning every water pot, every cooking vessel, the common things that we take for granted. And in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts. And all that is there will sacrifice, shall come and take from them, and see therein. And in that day shall be no more Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. What is he saying here in all this? He said two things. One, he says everybody. If you're his people, you're going to be there worshiping him anyway. If you're not his people, you have the option. You can come for the Feast of Tabernacles, and you can participate in that, and you can worship God, or you'll have no rain. Which in essence, well, I mean, we're talking about desert land. And without rain, people die. All your animals die. The people die. And so he's giving them a choice. He said, all of you who are still alive, who aren't destroyed, and you're not believers, I'm going to give you an opportunity to come to the Feast of Tabernacles. And if you come, then you'll be blessed. And if you don't, even for Egypt, it's not going to rain.
I thought in the 1,000-year reign of the Lord that everybody would be believers that were left alive on the earth, that weren't consumed sort of as now. So I'm a bit
Confused?
Well,
Perplexed?
yeah, because I thought that everybody, that the 1,000-year reign is going to be like heaven on earth. There won't be any evil doings, and all love each other, worship the Lord. But
That's not entirely correct, I don't think. Because in the millennial reign, Satan will be bound, but every man will still have an own heart.
Yes.
And will still go his own way.
Right.
Still have free will.
There will be those that turn against God.
Mm-hmm.
When Satan is released after the 1,000 years, these will join with him, and then God will zap them again.
Mhm.
And the Jerusalem he's talking about here would be the Jerusalem in the millennial kingdom, not
Yes.
the final Jerusalem.
Right. And he's gonna give them the option to come and worship.
I'm sorry?
And he's gonna give everybody the option, his people are gonna be there. You know, those who are not his people have the option to come and be blessed. You come and worship the true and living God and be blessed, or it won't rain, and everything you have will die. So one thing is the part about worship. But notice this in verses 20 and 21. He's talking about everything that we consider common will become holy. He says, in that day, holiness to the Lord shall be engraved on the bells of the horses. Now wait a minute. You know how insignificant little bells are on the chest plate are? That it's the horse that's important. But what he's saying, even the most insignificant, the bowls in the house that you cook with will be made holy. Either, the problem is today what we do is we take that which is holy, we defile it. But he says there's coming a day where there'll be no more defilement. Even the most common things will have that great inscription, so to speak, that is the holiness of the Lord, be engraved on everything, including the high priest headband. It says even the pots in the Lord's house, all the cooking utensils, everything that's used, the bowl, they will be like the bowls before the altar. And the bowls before the altar have all been blessed by the high priest. They've been sanctified before use. You don't use an unsanctified bowl in the tabernacle or in the temple. You use only things that are holy and pure and just. Remember when in the Old Testament, the tabernacle, once a year when the priest would go in and they would tie a rope around his leg, just in case. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the priest. I'd be like, listen, brother, why don't you go this year? I'll do it next year. Just in case. I mean, you know, I know I'm right with God, but just in case. Because, you know, there were people who probably thought they were right with God, but they really wasn't. And they wound up pulling them out the rope. I mean, God's serious about holiness and righteousness. He's serious. If we were a tenth as serious as he was, our lives would be different. But he says everything, all the pots and pans that you normally cook with, they're not going to be common anymore. They'll be fit for use in the temple. Even to the point where the bells on the horse's breastplate will have it on there. Well, I think that's a good place to end this.
But I'm still confused.
Hold on one second. Grayson,
Yep.
if you'll go ahead and stop that.